again, and welcome to Manch Talk. I'm Tammy Garthwaite.
Hey guys, I'm Carla Garrick.
Oh, it's dreary out.
It's so
it's so weird. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say. So I have this crane down by the river. That's kind of my talisman, and I take note. It's sort of like an awareness tool because you're walking and you zone out and whatever. So over the weekend, I finally got photos of it in flight, which I've pretty much been trying to do for 7 years.
Right, because it's hard.
And
by the time they take off,
well, honestly,
unless
I've only seen them flying maybe 4 times in 8 years. Like you'll see them wading in the water, and they're indicative of good ecosystems. They're very wise and quiet birds. Like I kind of like the way they're shaped, right? Like half above, half below.
And have you ever read about how, like, what some of their body language means? It's interesting because then when you see them, you're like, oh, isn't that interesting?
So I'd never, when there's one that's by the dam that kind of sits and then they scrunch up and then they look like a rugby ball with like little legs or something. And so two were flying down the river, and Louie and I were together, and we were like, finally, now we know there are 2 of them, right? Because we've only seen one, and I was like, there are 2 of them, and I think there's a baby. So finally, we were like, okay, there are definitely 2 of them. But then I never knew. I was like, they're big birds,
and
I was like,
large.
Do they sit in trees? And so
they
flew down the river, and then we went around the loop, and we were coming up this way. And like I literally heard a voice say, look up. And I looked up and it was right above my head, sitting in a tree up at the top.
There you go.
And I was like, okay. So Louie's like, let's go. And I'm like, no, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to caw until it flies away. So I pretty much did that. And then I got these really beautiful photos. But today, I went out early because it's a crazy day as always. And I stopped at one of my favorite spots. It's usually pretty and it's right on the water, but it is so dreary, to your words. So I was standing there and I go, find something to love. And I'm just looking and I see this red lure from a river thing. Like it's literally the only color in the shades of gray. This red thing. And I was like, oh. And then the next minute the bird just flew over my head. And I was like, oh, yeah.
I like days like that.
Yes. It's better than the occult deity statue destroyed by vandals.
Well, I read that and I was like, two things. One, people shouldn't destroy other people's property ever, right?
Good rule of thumb.
Tolerance is a thing. Like, ignorance.
Well, it's not yours.
Right, it's not your thing. They followed the rules. I mean, the guy up in Concord was like, I didn't want to approve it. He was willing to almost take the chance of the lawsuit. But then when you read it more, it's like, okay, so the impetus of it is not like, we would just like to share this. The impetus is, we're anti-religion, so we're going to bring in some group from Massachusetts to put up an anti-religious display because we don't like that there's a nativity. Okay, let it go, people.
So, yes.
Right?
So it was funny because I was thinking, okay, I think the city or the state house did the right thing, right? So free speech is, you got to allow things you don't like, right? But I will tell you, when I saw it go up, I was just like, it was
very weird.
Cringe. It's just kind of like, ew.
Because it was kind of it was an in-your-face thing. It wasn't.
Which I assume is why they did it, right? So it's kind of like, oh, we're going to put up a satanic thing next to the nativity scene. You're probably going to get some attention. But you should allow it because that is what freedom allows. And you shouldn't destroy it. But on the other hand, I think it's also important for people to understand, even though you may do something, maybe you shouldn't, as our grandparents used to say. But then also, just because you may do something
doesn't mean you
don't
should
always
have respect for other people.
That but
don't expect everything. Everybody's going to just hop on board and be okay with your thing that you want to do. I mean, it's just like, to be honest, it's just like if you live in a neighborhood and everybody's got these nice little yards and you decide you're never going to mow your lawn and you're going to let the weeds grow 6 feet high, you got to know that some neighbors, like, you got to know your neighbors aren't going to be happy.
Right.
Right. And can you do it? Of course, it's your property. Should you do it? Probably not. You can have some respect for your neighborhood and everything. So I was a little like,
Yeah, so anyway, someone overnight did go and destroyed it, and
Representative Ellen Reed apparently was the one who coordinated with the Massachusetts group to put
really?
it up. So I'm like, yeah.
Why? I didn't read the part about the Massachusetts group.
It's a
but
Massachusetts organization that is the whatever.
Well, don't mass up New Hampshire, as people
I mean,
like to say.
You know, it's funny. It's like it does tie into something else. And I understand why people get annoyed, but I also maybe I'm just more tolerant. I get why people. I get when people are bothered that people say happy holidays or do the holiday parade instead of Christmas. I get that bothers them because from their view and in their life, and if there's nothing wrong with it, this season is about the birth of Christ and it's Christmas. Fair. However, it's also Hanukkah. It's also, Kwanzaa. There's probably other things. I know there's another one, and I'm not even going to try to guess it. But I don't think every time somebody says happy holidays, it should be taken personally that they are anti-Christmas. It just is another, I don't know if somebody's Jewish or not.
But here's the thing. Okay, so first of all,
I'm just happy that somebody's saying happy or merry anything.
Right, but I mean, ironically, in most of the Commonwealth and British countries, we say happy Christmas.
Yeah.
So, what now? What does that mean, right?
So,
but the bigger question is, who primed you to care at all about those words, right? Like, who made you, after 10 years of people doing it, politicized Happy Holidays and Merry Christmas? That, for years, and trust me, I know, because when I moved here as an immigrant in 1996, I said Happy Christmas, and people would laugh at me, and my friends were like, hey, here we say Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays, right? And I was like, oh, okay. Then I'll probably just say Happy Holidays because I'm used to saying the happy part first, right? And then, what was it, like 10, 12 years ago? This just became a politicized thing, and it's manipulation of your attention to make you focus on the dumbest things possible, because who cares? Who cares?
No, I agree.
Like someone who's using the words happy and merry to talk to you. Take it and move on.
I don't, I was working today on invitations we have an open house that we do, and I was like, I have to mail some anyways. And I had to pick words.
Right.
And, sometimes I might pick something, and this year I just picked Merry Christmas, just basic Merry Christmas. Okay, I didn't have a whole lot of depth to the thought about why I was choosing Merry Christmas. Probably because I grew up saying Merry Christmas. Some years I'm sure it says holidays.
Right.
I don't know. It's just weird to me. So anyways, I just think people need to don't take everything so personally unless somebody's doing it to be mean.
See, but here's the thing. Are people taking it personally, or are people like us, or people who do a lot of social media, who do media, those kinds of things? It's just like, it almost feels like seasonal at this stage. I look at my Facebook memories, and I had done a radio thing this morning with Voice of Vermont or something with Ross Connolly of AFP, right? And one of the things we were talking about was Ross Ulbricht, right? Because he's on the list to be pardoned by Trump, very early in the administration. And of course, I'm trying to get him to come speak either at Liberty Forum or PorcFest, which was the deal back in the day when we platformed Lynn before anyone else would do it, right?
Because initially he would come speak here.
Yeah, he called me from prison once at Liberty Forum, and I was like, I will platform. I mean, I had already platformed Lynn by then. But, we were like, our community is very crypto-based, all of that, right? So anyway, after the radio interview, I'm going through my Facebook, and I noticed, there was a post from 7 years ago and a post from last year that was like, hey, write to Ross, he's in prison, here's the address, here's the stuff, right? So I kind of reshared it. But then I thought, wow, I didn't even know in the zeitgeist, it's weird, right, that today was the day, I talked about it on the radio, but today in my memories was also the day that we, generally tell people, hey, for Christmas, do something nice for this guy who's in prison, and all of that. And I thought, we become we're not that interested.
No, we are creatures
we're
of
actually
habit.
right.
Yeah, you do. And Facebook does remind you a lot. You'll be like, oh yeah, we did that too. Oh yeah, we did that too.
Right, and some of that I like because I think some of it is the more habitual you can be about good behavior, right? So good habits make your life better.
Yep.
Bad habits make your life worse. Most of bad habits actually stem from addictions. Like the more I'm looking at it.
Even if they're just not physical addictions, they're just, you get used to doing certain things.
Right.
I mean, I'll take swearing. I swear like a truck driver.
Me too.
But I didn't always do this. But then you get used to it. And then you swear like a truck driver. But if I forced myself to stop, just like forcing yourself to just stop doing anything, I wouldn't swear. Dan doesn't swear. Like, why do I swear like a truck driver?
So I think several things. One is I think women do it.
And I'm like, what was that?
I think it's women do it when we have to compete in a man's world.
To get the
like I was joking with one of my friends the other day. I was like, how am I like on my third wave of feminism, right? Like I'm like, let's just go back to like male chauvinist pig days and burning the bra and whatever. But I think it is affectation, at least for me it was, to be like a girl's guy, right?
Yeah.
Like, so you would swear along with the guys. But it is a terrible habit, and we can mitigate it because we don't swear for the most part.
And I'm fully aware half the time when I say it, I'll be like, oh, there I go again.
And that's so interesting you brought that up because that's actually kind of on my list. I'm starting to think, what next year? Like, what do I want to work on? And I was like, there really is no reason to be as much of a potty mouth as we are, right? And so I've been thinking about whether I would want to change that and how you do it, right? And it's kind of like, it's an affectation and it's kind of a filler. Like sometimes for me, it's just like, you know. So I don't know.
Speaking of bad habits and swearing.
Yes.
So all I brought with me today was an article that was in the Union Leader today because I'm not paying that close attention because it's all just so absurd. This is about all of this school building planning nonsense.
It's like $50 billion.
Insanity. No,
is it $50 billion?
No, it's not $50 billion, but it is billions.
$2 billion plus facilities. So, here, $500 million in school. Here, like
I don't even know what the real numbers are, but so on the education.
Neither do they.
Right. So one thing I wanted to mention is I know that Senator Victoria Sullivan did put in a bill to have intra-school choice. So if you live in Manchester and you want your kid to go to a different school within Manchester, if they have room, there's criteria and stuff, you could do it. And so that's a good start. So I'm a big fan, you are too, I'm a big fan of the education freedom accounts. I'm a big fan of not everybody thinking that every child is going to learn the same or must learn the same. I am pro-education, I'm pro-teacher, I'm pro-kid. I am not pro, let's just keep repeating the things that we've been repeating for decades. So this school buildings nonsense, I'm not even going to, I don't know which one of these numbers matter, so I'm just going to pick one that's in the article. They talk about, the plan references now, first of all, anybody who can count and knows any history of Manchester, because remember, Hooksett kids used to go here, Bedford kids used to go here, those kids have been gone for well over a decade.
2 decades, actually.
A long time. Right? That's what I mean. These kids haven't been there a long, long time. So we don't need 3 high schools. We haven't needed 3 high schools in well over a decade. But the problem is nobody wants to close Central. That's what it comes down to. We should be closing the old school that is in a not prime location for a school and focusing on just having 2 quality high schools. But the powers that be and the old guard can't let go of the fact that they went to Central High School. So there's that. So anyways, it says this new plan references a new Central High School and renovation and new construction at Weston Memorial with cost estimates ranging from $911 million to $1.3 billion. So I took the $1.3 billion number because sometimes you have to look at the absurdity of things.
Right.
So I looked, I said, hey, Google, how many? First I was looking at all students. And then I thought, no, this is just $1.3 billion for high schools. many high school kids do we have in Manchester? And we have 3,345 kids between the 3 schools. And obviously we don't need 3 schools because one of them has way less, half as many kids as the other. So I took 1.3 billion on my little calculator, and I had to do it 3 times because I was like, is that really what 3, wait, no.
Is that enough zeros?
I'm like 1.3 million,
They're
13
9,
million,
right? They're 9
like,
zeros.
Right, how many zeros?
9.
Make sure, because I did the math and I'm like, that can't be right.
9
so I
after
divided
the first one.
1.3 billion that they're talking about spending just on buildings, and I divided it by the number of kids in our high school. And I'm like, okay, well, that's insane because that's 406,000 plus per student. But that's a one-shot deal. So I said, okay, but they're talking about this being a 25, 30-year plan. So let's divide that number by 30 years. And it comes out to $13,552 for every single high school student for every single year for the next 30 years.
Yeah.
Just from the money they want to spend on buildings. Now, if you took that number...
Oh, and just to clarify, when she said 406, she meant 406,000.
$406,000.
406
per student.
1,000.
But then when you divide it by 30 years,
Right.
it's 13,552
Gotcha.
per every single high school kid, every single year for 30 years. Now, take that 13,000, and if we give them the state funding, the money that everybody's so outraged when the EFA kids get it, that's somewhere, $5 grand, $6 grand, depending on the circumstances. Now we're talking about upwards of $20,000 that without spending a penny on the school
actual
budget,
education, on learning.
$20,000 for every high school student to go to whatever school they wanted. That is nuts to think that investing this much money into buildings in 2025 and going forward, because why are we still focused on these buildings? I really try to be objective. I was just talking with Dan on the way over and I said, okay, little grade school kids, like maybe up to 3rd grade, probably need to be in some sort of social, because they're little kids. You don't know what your 6-year-old's going to be good at. And they need to learn to work with other kids and stuff. I don't think it necessarily has to be a school of 500 kids. It might need to be 100 kids, whatever. But by the time they're 10 years old, you kind of know what your kid's going to be good at. And why are we focusing on school buildings filled with all kids that we think all fit in the same peg holes when we know they don't? Why aren't there just pods of schools everywhere? In all these vacant office buildings, why aren't there 40 kids on the 3rd floor of the Anthem building sitting around watching the teacher in Oklahoma?
Forget about the teacher in Oklahoma. Why aren't there just businesses, commercial free markets of different people who are creating competing products that you could have? I mean, you could have
so many things.
Coffee shops that are for visual. You could have monkey bars, and that's some kind of place where the kids go, and that's where they do that. You could have so many different.
Even the concept of, and this goes back to old mill times. If you think about it, we're like coming back around. But like maybe some companies would have their own school on site.
Right.
So mom drives into school with her kids and drops them off at, she works for BAE, and BAE's got a facility that has all these different learning opportunities.
I mean, I think that there is, it's
funny. The future. It is the way.
And it's also the past, and maybe that's also the way. Like, I think sometimes what
used to be is what we need to get back to?
Sometimes I think that is the case. And we need to. Anyway, this is not the solution.
This is not the way.
This is like throwing bad money after worse money for worse and worse outcomes. Now, if someone could persuade me that we have kept paying more and more and more and more and more per student, and suddenly New Hampshire is producing one genius per 10 students, but instead we are down to, I believe,
under 30%.
Our literacy rate is 33%, and it's in the top 10 percentile of America. So like 40% of the states are doing worse than that.
And that's 33% across the state. In Manchester, it's worse than that. Like, that's taking into account the better schools. So another education thing that irks me all the time, and you're driving in the car and then you're like, hey, wait a minute. So every time we talk about education freedom accounts, the first thing that, the school choice people say is, well, but these other schools aren't required to take special ed students. And I always think, okay. But then I started thinking about it yesterday, and I'm like, wait a minute. Those special ed kids are already being educated in the public school system. So them not going to a different school doesn't cost us any more money than it already does. But when Susie leaves and takes her $5,000 and goes off to a private school, she's leaving behind $15,000 or more that can help offset the special ed costs of those other kids. So when you hear anything about, well, private schools aren't required to take special ed students, that's to distract you. That is not a math number that calculates into the number.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, I think, for this next session up at the State House. I think there's a real appetite to expand school choice.
Yes.
I think that's the right decision. Children should have more options. Humans generally function better when they have better choices and when you can find what you need in order to excel, right? Like, we aren't actually widgets. Our bodies aren't the same. Our minds aren't the same, and all of that. So hopefully they'll figure something out where we can have even more school choice, but having more hardware schools really is
spending
not
that kind of money is not
the solution.
And another thought I had driving over here is, and Dan goes, oh, I hadn't really thought about that. I go, okay, so we have all these schools. We have like 12 grade schools in Manchester or something. Okay, they exist. And obviously, all students aren't going to suddenly go someplace else. So there's going to be this need to maintain and occupy, all these different buildings. But I said, but why can't a school, like, what if we stop, what if, kindergarten through fourth grade or whatever, why can't that school lease out a classroom to a private entity to teach? And then they can share the common facility, so they all use the gym and they all use the lunchroom, but these classes are the public school classes and these classes are Joe Blow Learning Center.
I will tell you why, because we have too many lawyers in America and liability is not, and risk is not handled correctly anymore. So the appetite for any kind of
improvement innovation,
right, is stifled and destroyed by
fear.
by not allocating the correct amount of money to risk, right? So people become more and more and more risk averse because it's easier to say no than to make the decision. And here's a concrete example. We saw it through COVID, right? Like, it is a lot easier to just be like, well, shut it all down. That's by far the safest thing we can do, right? Is it? It's not. But, right, that was the argument. And it's like, because everyone's scared if they don't make the right decision, they're going to, get in trouble. Right. Who are you getting in trouble from?
They can't take away your birthday.
Exactly. And so even that goes back to like a mindset where it's we're not doing risk right, but I think mentally we're just not looking at problems in the right way. Like everyone, one of the reasons with the schools we never go anywhere is everyone is trying to please everyone. Yeah. And here's the reality. If you want to do innovative things, someone's going to be butthurt. Right. That is just a fact of the matter, right? And it's the ripping off of the BandAid that has to happen.
But when you know there's a wound underneath the BandAid, and we all know there's an education wound. We never change. I would love to see Manchester, which I wouldn't bet a beer on this. But I'd love to just see, and Croydon was doing it and stuff, just some community, a bigger community, to just say, we're not going to do it this way anymore. We've got this idea, and in 5 years from now, we're going to start doing it this way because we're tired of using the 1900 model.
Or even just, look, if you want to be stuck in your paradigm and be in that, fine.
But don't get in the way of everybody else.
But let other people opt out. And that is part of it that's so frustrating. It's kind of like, not only is there this clinging here, there's this clinging of control. Because it's like, no, I'm not going to let FOMO. I'm not going to let you go have fun. Or what if your idea is better than my idea? No, right? And that's a terrible mindset, because the idea is actually through competition. And it doesn't have to be, it can be collaborative competition. It can be healthy competition.
And sometimes things won't work.
Yes.
But things aren't working now, and we continue repeating them.
And There are philosophers who say that is the literal definition of insanity. So maybe we should stop being crazy and start to try different things and not be so afraid. We need to fix, honestly, I mean, I think we need to fix the legal system in America.
There's so many things that bubbles into.
The number one thing we could do is and this is how it works in most of the rest of the world. If you bring a lawsuit, if I sue Tammy and I lose, I have to pay Tammy's legal fees, which is how it should work, because that is a barrier to entry for me to willy-nilly sue you, right? Yep. So you wanted barriers to entry to lawsuits, and then we flipped that in the 80s, and since then, it's just become worse and worse and worse.
And everybody sues over everything.
Yeah, and you know, and it's just, incentives are misaligned societally, and it's gonna be a hard fix, but it's coming.
So there's that.
Are we here next week?
We're here next week.
Okay, and then it's Christmas. And then it's the New Year. Yeah. And so I don't know if there are any parades, anything coming up.
There was a parade last week. I went to we had a little celebration over at Barcode, which I had never been to before. They were very generous to us, and we had a little rah-rah for Victoria after the parade. There's all sorts of neat things to do. Get out and enjoy it. I mean, Tuscan Village in Salem, if nothing else, is a great place to go during the holidays. It's so festive, and it is like a little village.
I'm gonna try and hit the Amherst German Market. I've never done that, and I've heard that's kind of cool.
But you mean the one they had in the Circle isn't happening this year.
Really?
But there is another one. You have to Google. There's some other
entity. I saw a photo on Facebook maybe a couple of years ago, and I was like, "Oh, that looks charming."
It last year. It was
like
lovely.
Europe.
It was wonderful.
Yeah.
But there's things, and there's if you're on Facebook, you can look. There's a list of where people have the house lights. I always suggest, and I never do it, that you find out what night the bus is going around with the seniors and just follow the bus.
There's your life hack for this week, guys.
And if I was going to suggest one thing to do on a dreary day, and you want something just nice to yourself, go down to the Dancing Lion on Elm Street and have a
hot chocolate.
Hot chocolate. It's not cocoa, it's hot chocolate.
I might go do that right now.
There you go. Okay, we'll be back next week.
Bye, guys.
Bye.